Hey, good morning everybody. So here's the long promised video on how to crack the Autel batteries open. Um, Unfortunately, I don't have the other battery with me today, so I can't show you how that went together, but I'll do my best with the guys remaining here. So this is the one of the original cases that I had to crack. So let me explain the situation that I had. What I had was I had a battery where the cells were fine, but the controller, that's this one here, was reporting total flight times of about 50 minutes when fully charged. So basically the voltage detection circuit on this particular controller board was detecting the wrong voltage, and so what would happen is, you know, I'd be flying, or I should say my daughter would be flying because she's the one that discovered the problem, and I'd ask her, hey, how much flight time you got left? And she'd be like, 42 minutes. I'm like, 42 minutes? These things can't even stay up 20 minutes. What's going on there? So anyway, so we finally figured out that it was actually the controller that was reporting the wrong voltage. I've got a couple of X-Stars, and one that I bought came with a bloated battery, you know, and I knew immediately I was going to have to buy a new battery, and at the time they weren't exactly scarce. They still had them in Best Buy, so I was able to pick a couple up. But anyway, I'd had that bloated battery sitting around, and so given that I had possibly good circuitry there, I decided to try and figure out how the heck to open these things. It didn't look like it would be easy, and at one point I even considered just taking a razor blade and cutting the edge here, and then I figured I'd use a soldering iron or glue or epoxy or something to put it all back together. But I figured I had at least one stab at this, since I only needed one good case for housing the battery, since I didn't think the other one would be usable at all. And so I began trying to pry the edges up, and not knowing what was actually holding the thing together, you know, I slowly started probing the edges, and you can see how I've lifted these, and that's because this is the one that I did first. The other battery, you can't even tell that I opened it. So I was poking in it with screwdrivers and things like that. You'll see these plastic ties over here. Ultimately, this is what I ended up using to pry the thing open. And let me tell you, you will need, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, at least 12 of these, if you want to avoid damaging the case. So I'm going to pull this apart in a little bit, but first I'm going to show you what I did to pull it apart the first time. These plastic ties are not going to be thick enough to open up the thing, so you're going to have to double them up right at the tip, and you're going to need a pair of pliers to make sure you get a really sharp edge there. But essentially what you're going to do, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to let go of the phone here for a second. Hopefully I can do this. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to insert a plastic tie. Yep, there goes the phone. All right, you're going to want to wedge these in to, what is it, 1, 2, 6 different locations on the battery. And I'll try and show you where those are. So they are on the sides here. There's a clip to either side of where I'm inserting the plastic tie. Oh, that's right, I did it on the sides. Yeah, you don't want to go through the center, actually. You want to go through the sides like that. And like this. And if you have a spudger tool for you know, the ones that are used to open iPads and that kind of thing, you can slide one of those in here to open up the wedge. But basically you want to get two like this on this side, and that will partially release the clips. And then what you'll do is you'll take, there goes the phone again, you'll take one of these plastic ties, and like I said, you'll double it up and and squeeze it really tight with a pair of pliers, and then push it down in the middle, and then that will, take you the rest of the way to getting that clip to release. So you have to do that on this side, you have to do it on that side, you have to do it here, basically just one on this side, one on that side, about I'd say 5 millimeters from the edge of the center side, so out here, and of course the other side. The battery clips, which are spring loaded, there's nothing else holding them in other than the case itself, so you'll want to be careful not to lose any of the parts there when you do pull the cover off. Let me see if this thing is loose enough. I'm going to pause the video here for a second and just take it apart, because I only have one hand. What I meant to say is I only have one hand free, not one hand. So here I inserted, I didn't go to the other side because I realized that once I get this end pried off, the last side will just come off. So let me just see if I can get a wide shot here. And hopefully I won't drop the phone when I do this, but there it goes. All right, so, wow, that's really in there tight. Oh, I just closed it. There it goes. All right, so there's a few pieces. Oh, I left them in the case. There's going to be a button floating in here that sits on top of the circuit board. And then this circuit board will actually be encased inside there. It's actually sitting inside there. Now, this is sonically welded. It's a sonically welded assembly, so the cells that are in here and the controller and the power distribution board, they're all sealed inside. This is probably the most dangerous step in the whole process, and that is you have to find a way to crack the case. Now, I'm guilty of this. I actually took an X-Acto blade to this thing, and had I punctured the cells, that could have resulted in a fire, or even worse, an explosion right in my face. So I will say this, and I'll probably say it again a couple more times: be very, very careful with how you go about cracking this case open, and under no circumstance use any sharp object. What I am going to recommend for this is one of those little tools that are used to separate retention rings. You can get them at a Harbor Freight if you have that kind of a store around you. But basically, it's kind of like a small pair of pliers, but when you squeeze the pliers, it actually opens up on the other side. And so what you want to do is you want to stick them in these two holes and sort of force the weld open, okay? And the same thing on this side. Force the weld open, and then once you get it cracked open a little bit, that you can work an old credit card or hotel key or something, get it separated up at the top, not at the bottom. In fact, if you want to prevent the bottom from splitting, what I would recommend is that you either take some painter's tape and wrap it around 3 or 4 times to sort of give that area down here a little bit more reinforcement, so that when you suddenly break the seam up here, it doesn't go and separate the whole battery, because then you got a lot more to glue together. So anyway, once this is open, you can force the whole thing out wide enough to pull out the circuit board and the attached cells all together. Just do it again carefully so that no sharp edges damage the cells. But yeah, so you can open this thing up nice and wide, just like that, and just pull everything out. At that point, the only 2 hard connections to the battery are, so there's this power distribution board. This power distribution board is soldered directly to the cells. They come up through these slots that you see there. For the good cells, you don't want to remove that. What you want to do is you want to disconnect this cable here. It does have a lock, so you have to squeeze it. Right, let's see if I can zoom in on that. So you have to pinch that. You can see that to open it. And then you'll notice there's a wire going into a clump of silicone right on the edge there, and I've taken it off because I didn't realize what it was at the time. But there's a little thermocouple, or temperature wire there, or it might be a thermistor, and it's actually just kind of glued into that blob of silicone. You can just pluck it out of there. Don't cut the wire or anything, and you want to end up with your controller in one assembly. These two red and black thick wires that you see here are soldered to the pads on the power distribution board there and there. You'll have to heat those up to get separation, but essentially you want to leave the power distribution board with the cells, because you probably don't have a soldering iron powerful enough to get all that solder off there easily. Plus there's always the likelihood you might short out a cell or something, which again could lead to a fire or an explosion, so don't do that. In fact, what I would probably recommend is that you actually cut these wires right at the base, rather than try and desolder them, and then under a more controlled condition with nothing in the way, then you can easily pluck out the last little bits of wire. But anyway, so that's how you separate things out. Then you can simply just, if you have, like in my case, you have another controller, you can just plug that controller in and reassemble everything, slide it back into the case, and then there's no need to glue anything there. As long as you've got your clips here already, you can simply just drop your cap back onto the battery, and with a little bit of pressure there, just snap it back into place, and your battery will be good as new, assuming that you've got good controllers and good cells. I've seen some mention of people applying voltage directly to the power distribution here in order to wake up batteries that have gone to zero and are no longer recognized by the circuitry. Again, that's one of those things that I would caution. At the very least, take the minimal protection and maybe wrap the cells in one of those charging bags, and make sure you have some type of fire management equipment, a fire extinguisher, or a big bucket of salt water. I hear that actually deactivates lithium ion or lithium polymers. So yeah, that's it. That's the big video that you've all been waiting for. Battery Repair 101 for the Autel X-Star Premiums. Alright, let me know if you like the video. I've got a ton of work reverse engineering the firmware and some of the connections to the gimbal on the X-Star Premium. If all goes well here, tomorrow I will be purchasing one of the FLIR Duo prototype gimbals that someone has so generously put up for sale. So once I have that, I will start posting some pictures of that, and because that particular gimbal, the camera is removable, which means it offers up an HDMI and a USB connection. That's going to help a lot for me to probe out the signals on the regular Autel gimbal. Where I'm going with that is I'd really like to just put a 3D printed general purpose USB and HDMI connector there, where you can stick almost anything that requires either of those signals onto the X-Star. Additionally, when FLIR worked with Autel on this, they also implemented some minimal camera controls with the MathLink interface, which presumably happens all over USB. So again, there's a lot of different devices, you know, that could be used with the Autel X-Star, if we simply had a more open firmware to it. And you know, this firmware from Autel is based off of the Pixhawk software internally, and I've already confirmed that, or the PX4, I should say. So yeah, so hopefully lots of things coming, and hopefully the next video won't be so far in the future. All right, fly safe, guys.